Becoming, by Michelle Obama. Introduction. What do you do when you're sitting at a piano recital, your moment to shine, and you suddenly realize you've only ever learned to play on a broken instrument? Imagine you're a little girl, maybe 7 years old. You've practiced your song 1,000 times in your great-aunt's cramped music room. You know every note, every chord. The piano you learned on is old and worn, its keys are yellowed, and one of them, middle C, the most important key of all, has a little chip missing from the corner. That chip is your anchor. It's how you know where to start. Now, you're downtown in a grand hall, sitting in front of a flawless, gleaming baby grand piano. The audience is watching. Your parents are in the crowd, smiling. It's your turn. You lift your fingers to the keys, and your heart sinks. There's no chip. Every key is perfect, identical, a seamless ribbon of black and white stretching out before you. And in that terrifying moment of perfection, you are completely and utterly lost. You have no idea where to begin. This is a story from the early life of Michelle Obama, and in many ways, it's the story of her entire life. It's a story about learning to perform in a world that wasn't built for you, a world of perfect pianos when you've only ever known the chipped ones. It's about finding your anchor when the old landmarks are gone. Today, we're diving into her memoir, Becoming. This book has sold over 17 million copies worldwide, making it one of the best-selling memoirs of all time. But it's more than just a collection of stories from a former First Lady. It's a profound and deeply personal guide to navigating the questions that define us all. Who am I? And who am I meant to become? Michelle Obama takes us from a tiny apartment on the south side of Chicago to the most famous address in the world, and she does it with a kind of honesty that feels like a conversation with a wise friend. By the end of our journey today, you'll understand the powerful, unseen forces that shaped one of the most admired women of our time. And more than that, you will discover a timeless secret about your own story, that it is not a destination you arrive at, but a process you are always in. Your becoming is never finished. Book summary. Our story begins not in a palace, but on the second floor of a small brick house in Chicago's South Side. This was Michelle Robinson's world, a world where the soundtrack to her childhood was the sound of other people striving. From downstairs, through the floorboards, came the endless plink 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 of piano keys as students struggled through their scales in her great-aunt Robbie's music room. Robbie was a formidable woman, a piano teacher who demanded excellence and rarely seemed satisfied. Downstairs was her world, a silent, formal space where the furniture was covered in plastic and porcelain figurines were never to be touched. But upstairs was different. Upstairs was home. It was a whirlwind of noise and love, where Michelle and her older brother, Craig, slid across polished floors in their socks and held boxing matches in the kitchen. It was a space so small that for years, a flimsy wooden partition was the only thing separating her bed from her brother's. This world was held together by two pillars, her parents, Fraser and Marion Robinson. Her father, Fraser, was a city worker who tended boilers at the water filtration plant. He was a man of quiet strength and unshakable discipline. In his 30s, he was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis, a disease that slowly, relentlessly, began to steal his ability to walk. He went from a slight limp, to a cane, to 2 crutches. But Michelle never heard him complain. Not once. He accepted what came and just kept moving forward. His pride and joy was his car, a bronze 2-door Buick he called the Deuce and a Quarter. Behind the wheel, the limitations of his body seemed to melt away, giving him a sense of freedom he couldn't find on his own 2 feet. Her mother, Marion, was the family's steady, observant heart. She was the one who taught Michelle to think for herself and to use her voice. When Michelle was in a chaotic, failing second-grade class, her mother didn't just tell her to do her best. She saw the difference between whining and real distress. She went to the school and, through quiet, persistent lobbying, got Michelle and a few other students moved into a better, more challenging third-grade class. It was a small move, but it changed everything. Her mother's philosophy was simple but profound. "I'm not raising babies," she'd say. "I'm raising adults." She and Fraser gave their children guidelines, not rules, trusting them to find their own way. This foundation of love and high expectations created a young girl who was ambitious, even if she didn't know what she was ambitious for. She learned early that achievement was a currency. In kindergarten, when she froze during a reading test, stumped by the word white, the embarrassment weighed on her all night. The next morning, she didn't just ask for a do-over. She demanded it, refusing to be dismissed as incapable. She read every color card perfectly and walked home that day with a gold foil star stuck proudly to her shirt. That same drive led her to her great-aunt Robbie's piano. She wanted to prove to this stern woman that she could be a star student. But Michelle was also stubborn and lawyerly, always asking why. When she got impatient with Robbie's rigid method and started skipping ahead in the lesson book, Robbie exploded. Piano lessons became epic battles of will, a clash between a girl who wanted to learn faster and a teacher who believed there was only one right way to do things. This brings us back to that grand recital hall. As young Michelle sat paralyzed before that perfect piano, unable to find the chipped middle C that had always been her guide, her great-aunt Robbie, her foil, her adversary, walked up to the stage. She didn't scold her. She didn't say a word. She simply reached out and gently laid one finger on middle C, showing her where to start. In that moment, Michelle learned a lesson that would echo through her entire life. She was seeing the disparities of the world for the first time. She was learning that you don't always get the instrument you're used to. Sometimes you have to adapt, to find your place on a flawless keyboard, and play your song anyway. And sometimes, the person you thought was your greatest critic is the one who shows you the way. As she grew up on the South Side, the world around her was changing. It was the era of white flight, when families were leaving the city for the suburbs, and the racial makeup of her neighborhood and school shifted dramatically. She was raised in the cross-currents of that change. It was a world that presented her with questions she couldn't easily answer. One summer day, a cousin turned to her and asked, with a touch of accusation, "How come you talk like a white girl?" The question stung, because it held a kernel of a confusing truth. Her parents had drilled into her and Craig the importance of proper diction, of saying going instead of goin'. They were taught to own their smartness, and that was reflected in how they spoke. But in certain circles, speaking that way was seen as a betrayal, as if she were denying her own culture. She was just a girl on a stoop, but she was facing a question that would follow her, and later her husband, onto the national stage. Are you what you appear to be? It was a challenge of squaring who you are with where you come from and where you want to go. She was a long way, she realized, from finding her voice. That search for her voice, for her place, led her to apply to Princeton University, following in the footsteps of her beloved brother, Craig. But even this path was fraught with doubt. In her first meeting with her high school's college counselor, a woman who didn't know her at all, she was met with a dismissive smile. "I'm not sure," the counselor said, "that you're Princeton material." It was a swift, crushing judgment. It was a suggestion of failure before she'd even tried to succeed. It was another perfect piano, another moment of being told she didn't belong. For a moment, that old feeling crept in. Am I good enough? But years of keeping up with the ambitious kids at her magnet high school, Whitney Young, had taught her something. She wasn't going to let one person's opinion dislodge everything she knew about herself. Instead of giving up, she switched her method without changing her goal. She found a mentor who believed in her, her assistant principal and neighbor, Mr. Smith, who wrote her a glowing recommendation. In her college essay, She didn't pretend to be someone she wasn't. She owned her story. She wrote about her father's MS, her family's lack of experience with college, and the fact that, given her background, reaching was all she could do. And months later, a letter arrived in the mailbox on Euclid Avenue. It was an offer of admission to Princeton. She had shown that counselor, but more importantly, she had shown herself. She was Princeton material. But arriving at Princeton was like stepping into another world. It was overwhelmingly white and male. The students around her seemed to move with an effortless assurance, their trust in the world infinite. They'd had SAT tutors and had gone to boarding schools. It was like that piano recital all over again, realizing you'd learned on broken keys while everyone else had been playing on perfect instruments. She found her footing, as she always did, by finding her community. She gravitated toward the Third World Center, or TWC, a home base for students of color. There, among other Black and Latino students who were also navigating this strange new world, she found relief and support. She met one of her dearest friends, Suzanne Allel, a vibrant, joyful soul from Jamaica who seemed to live life with a Caribbean breeziness, unafraid to plunge into the unknown. Princeton taught her that there were other ways of being. She was still driven, still a box checker, still that girl who wanted to get things right. And so, after Princeton, she did the next logical thing. She went to Harvard Law School. And from there, she landed a job that was the very definition of success, an associate at the prestigious Chicago law firm, Sidley & Austin. She had made it. She was a lawyer on the 47th floor of a skyscraper, with a leather chair and a view of Lake Michigan. At 25, she had an assistant. She had a salary that would finally allow her to pay off her student loans. She had vaulted herself from the South Side to the very pinnacle of the professional world. She had checked every box. She had proven to everyone, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that she was good enough. And she was miserable. This is where Michelle Obama's story takes a turn. It's the part of the journey where becoming starts to mean unbecoming what you thought you were supposed to be. Life at the law firm was a grind of 70-hour work weeks, reading memos, writing memos, and editing other people's memos. The work was precise, intellectual, and empty. The little girl who dreamed of being a pediatrician because she loved kids was now spending her days looking after the legal concerns of corporations. She had followed the path of achievement so perfectly that she had missed the signs she was on the wrong road. Two events happened that shook her out of this high-achieving slumber. The first was the sudden, tragic death of her best friend from Princeton, Suzanne. Suzanne, the free spirit who had taught her so much about joy, was diagnosed with a rare and aggressive cancer and was gone at just 26. The loss was a brutal reminder of a simple truth: life is short and not to be wasted. The second was the death of her father. Fraser Robinson, the man who had been her rock, passed away from complications of his MS. He was only 55. His death left a crater in her life, but it also sharpened her focus. If she died, she didn't want to be remembered for the legal briefs she'd written. She felt certain she had something more to offer the world. In the midst of this confusion, a young man with a funny name walked into her life. He was a summer associate at the firm, and Michelle, as a junior associate, was assigned to be his mentor. His name was Barack Obama. And he was late on his first day. She was skeptical. Rumor had it he was brilliant, exceptional, maybe the most gifted law student one Harvard professor had ever seen. The secretaries were saying he was cute. Michelle figured you could put a suit on any half-intelligent black man and white people would go crazy. But then they went to lunch. And as he began to talk, her skepticism melted away. He spoke about his background, which was a world away from hers. He was the son of a Kenyan father and a white mother from Kansas, raised in Hawaii and Indonesia. He wasn't just smart, He was serious without being self-serious, breezy in his manner but powerful in his mind. And surprisingly, he knew her Chicago. Before law school, he'd spent 3 years working as a community organizer on the far South Side, trying to rebuild neighborhoods that had been devastated by the loss of steel mill jobs. He'd worked in the barbershops and Bible-thumping parishes she'd only known from a distance. There was an easy, immediate pull between them. But Michelle was focused on her career. "I don't date," she told him, trying to keep things professional. She even tried to set him up with her friends. But Barack was persistent. "I think we should go out," he said one day. "You're not my boss," he reasoned, with that smooth, confident smile. "And you're pretty cute." She eventually said yes. One summer evening, after a long day at a firm barbecue, he drove her home. They stopped for ice cream, and as they sat on a curb, their cones melting in the July heat, he turned to her. He looked at her with a curious smile. "Can I kiss you?" he asked. And as she leaned in, everything felt clear. As soon as she allowed herself to feel something for him, the feelings came rushing in, a toppling blast of lust, gratitude, and wonder. Any worries she had about her life and career seemed to fall away, replaced by a driving need to know everything about him. Their connection deepened one evening when she went with him to a church basement in Roseland, a neighborhood crippled by unemployment. He was there to lead a workshop for a small group of residents, trying to help them harness their discontent and turn it into real political power. He spoke with a passion and clarity that she had never seen before. He wasn't talking down to them. He was connecting their stories to a larger principle, a larger hope. He asked them a simple question that would stay with her for years. Do we settle for the world as it is, or do we work for the world as it should be? In that church basement, watching him inspire this small group of weary people, she saw the core of who he was. And she was convinced. But their path wasn't simple. Barack, she learned, wasn't so sure about marriage. He saw it as an unnecessary and overhyped convention. For Michelle, raised in the unbreakable union of her parents, marriage was a given. This led to a long, looping, lawyerly debate that stretched over months. One night, at a restaurant, as they were in the middle of this very argument, the waiter brought a dessert plate covered with a silver lid. When he lifted it, there wasn't a piece of chocolate cake. There was a velvet box with an engagement ring inside. Barack had staged the whole argument. As she stared at the ring, he looked at her and said that even though their love was already foundation enough, he wanted to take that leap with her. He asked her to marry him, and through her tears, she said yes. They were married in October 1992, surrounded by a joyful, interwoven mix of the eclectic, multicultural Obamas and the anchoring Robinsons from the South Side. Her brother Craig, standing in for their father, walked her down the aisle. But marriage didn't solve the central tension of their lives. It magnified it. Barack was a man with a vision, a man who felt a deep calling to public service. He was also a man who, as Michelle affectionately puts it, lived in his head. He needed his hole, a messy, book-strewn office where he could retreat to think and write. He was a serial overcommitter, taking on a teaching job, serving on non-profit boards, and soon, running for the Illinois State Senate. Michelle, meanwhile, had finally made her own swerve. She'd left the world of corporate law, taking a huge pay cut to work first for the city of Chicago, and then as the founding executive director of an organization called Public Allies, which mentored young people for careers in public service. For the first time, she felt like her work was immediately meaningful. But their two ambitious paths were often in conflict. And then came the desire for children. It wasn't easy. A heartbreaking miscarriage was followed by the clinical, lonely, and stressful journey of in vitro fertilization. It was a burden that fell almost entirely on her. Barack was in Springfield, legislating, while she was at home, giving herself daily hormone shots. It was a small moment of reckoning, a test of her desire. And she wanted it so much. The reward came in the sound of a swishing, watery heartbeat on an ultrasound machine. On the 4th of July, 1998, Malia was born. 3 years later, Sasha arrived, completing their family. Motherhood became her motivator. But it also intensified the strain. She was now juggling a demanding job, 2 small children, and a husband who was often gone. The new math of their family was 2 kids, 3 jobs, and what felt like no free time. The frustration built up, erupting in arguments about his lateness, about the unequal division of labor, about the feeling that she was carrying the weight of their family life alone. Their love was deep, but they had a knot at the center of their relationship they couldn't loosen. This is a point where many stories end. But theirs didn't. They went to couples counseling. It was there, in the quiet of a therapist's office, that they learned to talk again, to separate their weapons from their wounds. Michelle began to see that she was more in charge of her happiness than she was allowing herself to be. She'd been waiting for Barack to change, to give up his ambitions for a more normal life. But the counseling helped her realize that she could be happier by changing her own approach. She started getting up at dawn to exercise, reclaiming a piece of the day for herself. She established an ironclad dinner and bedtime routine for the girls, putting the responsibility on Barack to either make it home on time or catch up later. She wasn't waiting for Dad anymore. It was his job to catch up with them. It was a profound shift. She was learning to build a life that felt whole on her own terms, not in reaction to his. This new strength would be tested in ways she could never have imagined. In 2004, Barack was asked to give the keynote address at the Democratic National Convention. He was just a state senator from Illinois, a relative unknown. That night, he spoke for 17 minutes. He spoke of his improbable story, but he connected it to the larger American story. He spoke of hope over cynicism. By the time he finished, the crowd was roaring, and the world had changed. Suddenly, he wasn't just Barack. He was Barack Obama, a political rock star. The quiet life they had fought so hard to build began to unravel. The question started to bubble up, first as a whisper, then as a roar. Would he run for president? Michelle didn't want him to. She loved the life they had, their 2 girls, her meaningful work at the University of Chicago Medical Center, where she had become a vice president. A run for president felt like a threat to all of it. She feared the ugliness of politics, the loss of privacy, the danger. She feared what it would do to their daughters. It was her against the world. The decision, Barack had told everyone, was a family decision. Which was code for, only if Michelle says I can. In the end, she said yes. She said yes because she believed in him. She said yes because she saw the world as it was, with its injustices and its struggles, and she knew that her husband had a deep, unwavering desire to work for the world as it should be. And she couldn't stand in the way of that. But she made one condition, one she announced to their closest friends: if he lost, this would be the end of his political career. The campaign was a human blur. Life became a vortex of flights, speeches, and crowds. Michelle had to learn to live in this new world, a world where she was no longer just Michelle Robinson from the South Side, but a public figure, a symbol. And the punches started coming. She was criticized for a comment she made about being really proud of her country for the first time, words that were twisted and spun to paint her as unpatriotic. She was labeled an angry black woman. A playful fist bump with Barack was called a terrorist fist jab. A news network referred to her as Obama's baby mama. It hurt. It was as if there were a cartoon version of her out there, a Godzilla of a political wife that she didn't recognize. She was learning the hard lesson her mother had taught her about bullies. Their aggression has little to do with you and everything to do with them. But it was hard not to take it personally. She found her strength, once again, by finding her voice. Not the voice the pundits wanted, but her own. She went to Iowa and spoke not as a political spouse, but as a mother, a daughter, a wife, a working professional. She told her story, the real one, with all its imperfections and struggles. She connected with people not over politics, but over shared values. And they responded. The campaign started calling her the closer for her ability to win over undecided voters. The journey took them all the way to election night 2008. As the results came in, Michelle sat in a hotel suite in Chicago, quietly terrified. She couldn't shake the fear of the Bradley effect, the theory that white voters would lie to pollsters and then vote against a black candidate in the privacy of the voting booth. Was America really ready? At 10 o'clock, the networks called it. Barack Hussein Obama would be the 44th President of the United States. That night, standing on a stage in Grant Park before a sea of 200,000 people, behind a wall of bulletproof glass, her life changed forever. She was no longer just becoming Michelle. She was becoming First Lady. Living in the White House, she says, is like living in a fancy hotel where you're the only guests. It's a place of strange grandeur and surreal stillness. The walls are thick, the windows are bomb-resistant, and the silence is deep. It is a bubble, sealed off from the everyday world. Her first priority was to make it a home for her daughters. She instructed the staff that Malia, then 10, and Sasha, 7, would still make their own beds. She fought for moments of normalcy, for playdates and sleepovers that required complex security arrangements. But she also understood the unique opportunity they had. When Nelson Mandela was 92 and frail, she took her daughters to meet him in his home, a quiet, profound encounter that taught her that progress happens not over years, but over lifetimes. As First Lady, she had to find her own path. There is no handbook. She knew she couldn't be a well-dressed ornament. She had to do something purposeful. That purpose began in the soil of the South Lawn, where she broke ground on a vegetable garden. It was a simple act, but it was a powerful symbol. The garden became the springboard for Let's Move, her major initiative to combat childhood obesity. She went on talk shows and did push-ups with Ellen DeGeneres. She hula-hooped on the lawn and appeared on Sesame Street. She was using her platform, her image, to connect her message to the mainstream. With Drive. Jill Biden, she launched Joining Forces, an initiative to support military families, an issue that became deeply personal as she spent time at military hospitals, listening to the stories of wounded warriors and their spouses. These were people who embodied resilience, who, despite unimaginable hardship, carried on with dignity and hope. But the White House years were also marked by unspeakable tragedy. She remembers the day of the Sandy Hook shooting, finding Barack in the Oval Office, his posture slumped, the weight of the nation's grief on his shoulders. He was so broken by the images of what had happened in those classrooms that he couldn't even describe it to her. It was one of the few times she chose not to stand with him in public, sending him to the prayer vigil in Newtown alone because she felt too raw, too much like a mother, to be able to offer any comfort. She lived with the constant, ugly undercurrent of racism that her family's presence in the White House provoked. The birther conspiracy theory, fanned into flames by Donald Trump, wasn't just a political tactic, it was a dangerous, deliberate effort to delegitimize her husband and stir up hatred. It put her family at risk. And she would never forgive him for it. Through it all, she held on to the motto she and Barack tried to live by, a motto she shared with the world at the 2016 Democratic Convention: when they go low, we go high. It wasn't about ignoring the ugliness. It was about refusing to let it pull you down, refusing to stoop to its level. It was about choosing dignity. As their 8 years came to a close, she watched the 2016 election with a sense of disbelief and then a deep, aching disappointment. The night Donald Trump was elected, she went to bed, wanting to block it all out, a feeling she admits was not productive, but was honest. Leaving the White House on Inauguration Day in 2017 was a blur of emotions. Sitting on that stage, looking out at a crowd that was far less diverse than the one at her husband's inaugurations, she stopped even trying to smile. The transition was a passage to something new, and she was ready for it. She was ready to find herself again. Commentary. So, what do we take from a life so extraordinary? Michelle Obama's journey is a powerful lesson in what it means to become. And the most important word in that sentence is become. It's a verb, an action, a process that is never finished. So often, especially when we're young, we think of life as a series of boxes to check. Get good grades. Go to a good college. Get a good job. We build our lives like a perfectly folded piece of origami, trying to tuck in every messy bit, hoping it all looks right from the outside. Michelle did that. She checked every box, reached the pinnacle, and found herself feeling empty. And that's the first great lesson here. Fulfillment isn't a destination. It isn't a box you check. It's a feeling you have to actively seek. Her story gives us permission to swerve, to question the path we're on, even if it's the path everyone told us was the right one. She reminds us that it's okay to leave the prestigious law firm, to take the pay cut, to start over in search of work that feels meaningful. Your passion matters more than your paycheck. Your purpose matters more than your prestige. The second lesson is about partnership. The love story between Michelle and Barack is not a fairy tale. It's real. It's a story of two strong, ambitious people learning how to build a life together. It's about fighting, and making up, and going to counseling. It's about recognizing that you can't change another person, but you can change your own approach. She didn't wait for him to become the husband she thought she needed. She learned to take charge of her own happiness, and in doing so, made their partnership stronger. It's a beautiful model for what a modern, equal relationship can look like. Two whole people, not two halves, choosing to walk the same path together. And finally, her story is a masterclass in finding and using your voice. From the little girl demanding a do-over in kindergarten, to the college student owning her South Side story, to the First Lady speaking out for children's health and military families, her journey is about refusing to be silenced, refusing to be small. She was told she wasn't Princeton material. She was told she was too angry, too tall, too direct. She was caricatured and criticized. But she learned that you can't let others define you. You have to define yourself. You have to tell your own story. As she says, your story is what you have, what you will always have. It is something to own. So, what can you do with this, right now? First, think about your own story. What are the parts you hide? What are the parts you're proud of? Own all of it. Your imperfections, your chipped keys, are not weaknesses. They are the source of your unique strength and perspective. Second, find your people. Michelle's journey was never a solo one. It was buttressed by her family, her friends, her mentors. Find the people who see you, who believe in you, and lean on them. And third, ask yourself that question that Barack posed in that church basement all those years ago. Are you settling for the world as it is, or are you working for the world as it should be? You don't have to be president to make a difference. You just have to start where you are, with what you have. That was a look inside Becoming by Michelle Obama. We've journeyed through the main arcs of her incredible life today, but I have to be honest with you. A summary, no matter how detailed, is like looking at a photograph of a beautiful landscape. You can see the shapes and the colors, but you can't feel the sun on your skin or the breeze in the air. The real power of this book is in the quiet moments, in her personal reflections, in the texture of her voice on the page. This summary is meant to give you a map of that landscape. If anything we've explored today has spoken to you, I urge you to take the journey yourself. Grab a copy of the book, because reading it is more than just learning facts. It's an experience that can genuinely shift how you see your own potential and your own path of becoming. The link to the book is in the description below. Also, if you've found this journey valuable, please take a moment to hit that subscribe button and give this video a like. It tells us that these deep dives matter, and it ensures you won't miss our next exploration into another life-changing book. Let's keep growing and becoming together.